All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the hidden mechanics behind America's absolute biggest comedy institution. We're going to break down this really fascinating essay by Jordan R. called Few Gardens to try and understand exactly why Saturday Night Live defines our comedy standards. We're going to look at the sheer machinery of it all, the massive scale, and the kind of surprising way our modern digital landscape actually feeds the beast of institutional comedy. It's essentially a structured look at the architecture of a laugh.
But first, let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about it for a second. How do you know when a joke is actually funny? Like, are you laughing because the premise is objectively, undeniably hilarious? Or are you laughing because you're subtly being told to? It's a bit of a psychological puzzle, right? And to solve it, we kind of have to look at the absolute gold standard of televised comedy.
So, to figure that out, we have to look at the ultimate standard of televised sketch comedy in the United States. And let's be real. We're not just talking about a late-night show here. We're talking about the foundational measuring stick for the entire industry.
There's this defining thesis in Jordan R.'s essay that is so simple but just profound. It says its visibility is its value. Think about that. SNL isn't necessarily the standard because it represents the absolute, unassailable apex of the comedy form. It's the standard because of its sheer massive reach. Being everywhere, being seen by millions every single week, that creates a baseline that literally everyone else has to be judged against.
That sheer gravity is exactly what makes SNL the undisputed institution of comedy. It's the immediate example we all reach for when we're judging any comedic effort. It's the heavyweight champion. Not necessarily by knockout, but just by pure institutional weight. But to really understand this giant, we actually need to look at its complete opposite.
We have to pivot away from the massive, structured safety of SNL and look at the chaotic spaces where smaller, independent troupes are thriving. The digital comedy frontier, basically the internet Wild West. Take an independent troupe like Studio C, broadcasting on BYU TV. The essay points out this one specific sketch they did, where a bearded guy with a microphone is aggressively hawking masculinity supplements. It's a direct, spot-on mockery of your archetypal red pill podcast philosophy. It's such a great micro-example of digital comedy finding a massive audience simply by holding up a mirror to hyper-specific internet archetypes. The joke is totally implicit, poking fun at these rigid philosophies that completely ignore human complexity.
And comedy absolutely thrives in this digital ecosystem. Why? Well, because it breaks up that heavy, narrative-driven doom scrolling we all fall into during the day. But here's the catch. Independent creators are navigating an absolute minefield right now. Many users have abandoned platforms as they become incredibly polarized. And on top of that, you have the introduction of super sophisticated bots. These bots can artificially inflate certain posts or completely bury others at the literal press of a button. It is a wildly unstable environment for comedies to survive in.
Which naturally leads us to ask these massive, almost existential questions. In a digital ecosystem that is constantly being manipulated by bots and polarized algorithms, who knows what anyone really thinks? I mean, how could they? What is actually real? This level of total chaos is exactly why massive institutions require heavy structural safety nets. They just simply cannot survive in total unpredictability.
And this Wild West environment highlights a major operational difference, what we can call a workshopping deficit. It's the core difference between how a small internet outfit tests its material versus how a massive institution does it. See, independent outfits like Studio C have to create absurdity that stands completely on its own 2 feet. They don't have laugh tracks. The joke literally has to land in a vacuum. But on the flip side, Saturday Night Live is under a vastly different kind of pressure. They are forced to be funny this specific week. They are bound to a relentless, unyielding broadcast schedule. So the really crucial point here is that SNL actually relies on these smaller outfits to do the innovating for them. Independent troupes have the total luxury of workshopping across audiences. They can try things out, fail miserably, and try again. The SNL machine simply does not have the time to organically workshop material. They have to move way too fast. Most, if not all, of their material is directly reacting to incredibly recent events.
Which brings us right to the title of Jordan R.'s essay and this fantastic metaphor. We have few gardens of our own. Because of the rapid demands of the show, SNL completely lacks the experimental spaces, the gardens, to organically plant and grow a joke over time. Instead, they have to harvest what's already blooming in the cultural zeitgeist, often looking out to that digital frontier for the seeds of what actually works. So, without their own gardens to grow jokes, they're forced into mocking history in real time.
SNL's massive scale entirely dictates its immediate relationship with real-world events.
The demands of operating at this kind of scale are honestly staggering. Because they're so laser-focused on recent trends, the troupe has to take on roles they barely have time to embody. You've got actors reading lines off cue cards that are literally being written and rewritten up to the very last second. Furthermore, their immense reach demands a level of standards and practices precision that is wild. Every single word is calculated. And because SNL mocks history exactly as it unfolds, they are actively shaping how the American public experiences those historical events.
Which brings us to this one, incredibly powerful foundational concept. Anarchy at scale is absolutely intolerable. True, chaotic, unpredictable comedy, the kind you might stumble upon in the darkest corners of the internet, just cannot exist on an institutional broadcast level. When you have an audience of millions, the comedy must be contained, it must be controlled, and it has to be heavily structured.
And that intense need for containment? Well, it leads to the illusion of laughter. Let's go ahead and pull back the curtain on the artificial mechanisms SNL actually uses to guarantee those laughs.
Think about their rigid weekly format. Step 1. Teams assemble and furiously cut material for the main event. Step 2. The celebrity host is looped in. The music transitions are meticulously planned. But Step 3 is the most vital. The live audience is seated and they are psychologically primed. They are prepped, warmed up, and basically trained to react.
And why does that matter so much? Because the specific function of that primed in-studio audience is to act as a giant signal flare for the viewers sitting at home on their couches. That live laughter dictates to the millions watching exactly what is meant to be absurd and exactly what is meant as a joke. It is, by definition, a manufactured cue.
So we return right back to that original question I asked you, directly challenging how you watch television. Are you laughing at the joke itself, or are you laughing because the primed studio audience told you to? Are these massive institutional cues overriding your own independent sense of humor? This, right here, is the immense power of the comedy standard.
I want to leave you with this final, honestly kind of chilling thought from the essay. Someone is laughing, so it must be funny. Even if the joke is saying something that doesn't seem true. Even if the joke is, perhaps, insisting upon something that, in light of circumstance, isn't funny at all. When an institution controls the laugh track, they have the highly unsettling power to define reality itself. Definitely something to think about the next time you hear a crowd roaring on your screen. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning what you watch, and I'll catch you next time.